The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting a warm golden hue across my living room. I was halfway through a book when I noticed something strange out the window. 5 figures emerging from the house next door. The house had been empty for a while, and I figured new tenants were moving in. But these weren't your usual neighbors. They moved gracefully, almost otherworldly, with striking green skin that glowed in the afternoon light. Their hair was a shade of blue so vivid it looked like a piece of the sky had come to life. They wore minimal, form-fitting clothes that seemed both exotic and functional, perfectly suited for their unique physiques. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I was seeing things. But no, as they came closer, there was no mistaking it. My new neighbors were definitely not human. I sat up straight, heart pounding in my chest. I had heard of aliens visiting Earth before, but to have 5 of them as my neighbors? That was something out of a sci-fi movie. One of them noticed me peeking through the window and waved, a wide smile on her face. Her features were striking, with angular cheekbones and eyes that shimmered in a way that made them look like they were glowing. She said something to the others, and soon all 5 of them were looking at me, waving cheerfully. I swallowed hard and waved back awkwardly. What else could I do? Later that evening, curiosity got the better of me. I went over to introduce myself. As I approached their house, I noticed they had already settled in quite quickly. The once vacant garden was now lush with plants I didn't recognize, all shimmering under the moonlight with a faint glow. I knocked on the door, and it opened almost instantly. One of the women, the one who had waved first, greeted me with a smile that could light up a room. Up close, she was even more captivating. Her green skin had a soft luminescence, and her eyes were like pools of light. "Hello," she greeted me enthusiastically, her voice melodic but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. An accent, perhaps? "You must be our neighbor?" Yeah. Hi, I'm Jake," I stammered, trying to keep my composure. "I live next door." She tilted her head slightly as if studying me, then smiled wider. "We are so pleased to meet you, Jake. I am Thera," she said, gesturing toward herself. "And these are my sisters." Oh, the other 4 stepped into view. Each of them was striking in their own way, though they shared similar features. Their skin shimmered under the soft lighting, and they moved with a grace that seemed almost choreographed. It was both mesmerizing and unsettling at the same time. "This is Nira, Zyra, Lyra, and Zira," Thera continued, pointing to each one in turn. They nodded in greeting, their eyes fixated on me in a way that made my pulse quicken. "Nice to meet you all," I said, my voice a bit shaky. "So, are you guys from around here?" There was a brief moment of silence before Thera laughed softly, a sound that was almost musical. "Not quite. We're, visitors. We've come from a place far from here." Right," I replied, unsure of how to continue. "So, how are you finding the neighborhood so far?" "It's lovely," Zira chimed in. Her voice was smooth, almost hypnotic, very peaceful. "But we were hoping to get to know our neighbors better." I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I forced a smile. "Well, it's a quiet place. You'll like it here." "We hope so," Nira said, stepping closer. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment it felt like she was peering into my soul. "We're looking forward to, making connections." The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. I wasn't sure if it was her tone, the intense gaze, or just the sheer otherworldliness of the situation. But I felt a strange mix of fear and fascination. "Right," I said, stepping back slightly. "Well, it was nice meeting you all. If you need anything, I'm just next door." Before I could turn to leave, Lyra spoke up. "Actually, Jake," she said, her voice softer than the others, almost shy, "we were wondering if you would like to join us for dinner tomorrow night. It's a tradition in our culture to share a meal with new acquaintances." There it was again. That strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something about their invitation felt important, like it was more than just a simple dinner. Sure," I said. despite the voice in the back of my mind telling me to decline. That sounds nice. Wonderful, Thera said, her smile returning. We'll see you tomorrow then. As I walked back to my house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was happening. Something I wasn't prepared for. My 5 new neighbors were more than just a curiosity. They were a mystery. And I had a feeling that dinner tomorrow night would be the beginning of something far more complex than I could ever imagine. That night I barely slept. My mind was racing, replaying the encounter with Thera, Nira, Zyra, Lyra, and Zira. The way they had looked at me, like I was more than just their neighbor, like I was. Something else entirely. The next day, I tried to go about my day as usual, but it was impossible to focus. My thoughts kept drifting back to the 5 alien women next door. Who were they really? Why were they here? And why did it feel like they had some kind of interest in me? By the time evening rolled around, I was a bundle of nerves. I considered canceling the dinner, but something told me that doing so would be a mistake. Besides, I was curious. Curious about them, about their world, and about what exactly they wanted from me. I arrived at their house just as the sun was setting. The door opened before I could knock, and Thera greeted me with that same radiant smile. "Jake, welcome," she said, ushering me inside. "We've been waiting for you." As I stepped into their home, I was struck by the strange beauty of their decor. The walls were adorned with glowing plants and artifacts that seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly light. It was like stepping into a completely different world. The 5 of them were seated around a large circular table, each of them smiling warmly at me as I entered. The atmosphere was calm, but there was an underlying tension that I couldn't quite place. "We're so glad you could join us," Zira said, her voice low and soothing. "Yeah, me too," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. As the meal began, they asked me questions about my life, my work, my experiences on Earth. It felt normal, but there was always that undercurrent of something more. Their eyes never left mine, watching my every move, listening intently to every word. Then, just as I was starting to relax, Thera leaned forward slightly and asked, "Jake, have you ever heard of our species' mating season?" The question hit me like a freight train. My fork paused midway to my mouth, and I blinked at her, unsure if I had heard correctly. "Mating season?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Thera nodded, her eyes locked onto mine. "Yes, it's a very important time for us and—" Well, we've been discussing it. You see, we've chosen you, Jake." The room seemed to spin for a moment as the weight of her words sank in. Chosen me? For what? I swallowed hard, suddenly realizing that this dinner was the beginning of something far more complicated than I could have ever imagined. The air in the room thickened as the weight of Thera's words settled between us. I had been chosen, but for what exactly? My thoughts raced, and I struggled to find words that made sense. This wasn't some casual dinner anymore. It had shifted into something far more serious, something I wasn't prepared for. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my composure. Chosen? For what exactly? I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer. Thera's gaze never wavered as she leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering just enough to send a chill down my spine. "Our species has a tradition, Jake. During the mating season, we must find a compatible partner to ensure the continuation of our race. And we've chosen you as the one most suitable for us." The room fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of those strange glowing artifacts on the walls. I glanced around at the other 4 women, Nira, Zyra, Lyra, and Zera, and noticed the intensity in their eyes. Each of them seemed to be waiting for my reaction, their faces calm, but their body language tense, as if they, too, were unsure how this would go. "Mating season," I repeated, still trying to process everything. "Yes," Zira said softly, breaking the silence. "It's an essential part of our biology. Without it, we cannot survive, and our species." Well, we face extinction." I could feel my pulse quickening as her words sunk in. This was more than just a request for companionship. It was life or death, not just for them, but for their entire species. The pressure of it all made my chest tighten, and I found myself leaning back in my chair, putting some distance between us. "So you want me to—" "Oh, to help you?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Yes," Lyra responded, her voice gentler than the others. "But we understand this is not something you're familiar with. We want you to know that you have a choice. However, rejecting us—" She trailed off, her eyes clouding with concern. Lyra took over, her expression more direct. "Rejecting us would lead to devastating consequences, both for us and potentially for you. Our species bonds deeply with our chosen mate. If that bond is refused, it could have severe physical and emotional effects on us and you." The gravity of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a casual arrangement, there were real consequences at stake. I glanced from one alien to the next, searching for any sign that they might be joking, but their faces remained deadly serious. "Why me?" I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why not someone else?" Lyra smiled softly, her glowing eyes filled with something that almost resembled affection. "You are compatible, Jake. There is something about your nature, your biology, your essence, that resonates with us. You may not understand it, but we feel it, and it has drawn us to you." I felt my mouth go dry. Compatible? What did that even mean in this context? How could I be compatible with beings from another planet, from another species altogether? "Can you explain this?" This bond?" I asked hesitantly. "What does it entail?" Zara, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "The bond is more than physical, Jake. It's emotional, mental. It's a connection that transcends what humans may understand as a relationship. When we mate, it creates a lifelong tie, something that binds us to our chosen one on every level." I shook my head, feeling overwhelmed. This was too much, too fast. Just yesterday, I was living a normal, uneventful life. Now, I was being asked to engage in something that sounded like it came straight out of a science fiction novel. Except, it wasn't fiction. It was real. Very real. "I need time," I said, standing up abruptly. "I need to think about this." Thera rose with me, her expression calm but understanding. "Of course, we do not wish to pressure you, Jake. But please understand, our mating season is limited. If too much time passes—" Well, it may be too late for us." The others stood as well, watching me with a mix of hope and concern. I could feel their gazes on me as I made my way to the door, my heart racing. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I took a deep breath, trying to clear my head. What was I supposed to do? This wasn't just a decision about romance or attraction. It was about survival. For them, and apparently for me as well. As I walked back to my house, the weight of it all pressed down on me. I couldn't just walk away from this, but I also couldn't dive into something I didn't fully understand. The idea of mating with 5 aliens, each with their own desires, personalities, and expectations, was both terrifying and strangely compelling. I spent the next few days trying to avoid them, but it was impossible. Every time I glanced out my window, one of them would be there, watching me, waiting for some kind of answer. I knew I couldn't avoid them forever, but I needed more time. More than anything, I needed to understand what I was truly getting myself into. On the 4th day, Thera knocked on my door. "Jake," she said softly, her expression serious, "we need to talk." "Bull—" I hesitated but eventually let her in. She sat down across from me, her hands clasped in her lap. "Our time is running out," she said, her voice tinged with urgency. "We don't want to pressure you, but though if you choose not to help us, we will have no other option but to leave. And if we leave without bonding, the effects on us will be irreversible." I swallowed hard, the pressure building again. "What happens if I say no?" I asked, needing to hear the full truth. Thera's eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw a hint of vulnerability in her expression. "We would wither, Jake. Without a mate, without the bond, our bodies would begin to deteriorate. And eventually, we would die." Uh, Her words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time, I truly understood the stakes. This wasn't just about them wanting me, it was about their survival, their lives. But I don't know if I can handle this, I admitted, my voice shaking. It's too much. 5 of you? I'm just one guy. I don't even know how this works. Thera smiled gently. We're not asking you to understand everything right now. We're asking for trust. Trust that we will guide you, that this will be a partnership, one where you are not alone. We care for you, Jake, more than you realize. Oh, her words struck a chord within me, and I felt something shift. Maybe it was the sincerity in her voice, or the realization that I was their last hope, but something inside me began to soften. I couldn't just walk away from them, not now. I'll try, I said quietly, the words barely leaving my mouth. Thera's eyes lit up with relief, and she reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. Thank you, Jake. You have no idea what this means to us. The following days were a blur of preparations. The 5 of them, Thera, Nira, Zira, Lyra, and Zira, took turns explaining more about their species, their customs, and what to expect during the mating process. It was still overwhelming, but I began to feel more at ease. They weren't just otherworldly beings anymore. They were individuals, each with their own hopes, fears, and desires. I found myself growing closer to them, particularly Thera, who seemed to be the leader among them. She was patient with me, always taking the time to explain things in a way I could understand. There was a warmth to her that I hadn't noticed before, something that went beyond her alien appearance. One evening, as we sat together in their glowing garden, Thera looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen in her before. Jake, I need to ask you something important, she said, her voice steady. When the time comes, when we begin the mating process. Are you ready for what it will entail? I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. I don't know, I admitted, but I want to try. I want to help you. Thera nodded, her eyes softening with gratitude. That's all we can ask for, Jake. The rest will come in time. As the night wore on, I realized that this was no longer just about survival. It was about something more. It was about connection, about bridging the gap between 2 very different worlds. And though I was still scared, I knew that I was no longer alone in this. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope between 2 worlds. I had agreed to help Thera and her sisters, but the weight of what I had committed to still hung heavily over me. It wasn't just the physical aspect of what they were asking, it was the emotional and psychological depth of it all. They weren't human, and yet, in many ways, they felt more human than I could have ever imagined. Each day brought new interactions, moments where the 5 alien women showed more of themselves, and I found myself drawn to them in unexpected ways. They were different, yes, but they were also caring, curious, and deeply emotional. They treated me not just as a chosen mate, but as a partner, someone whose thoughts and feelings mattered. One afternoon, I found myself alone with Nira in the garden. She was quieter than the others, more introspective, and I had noticed her watching me from a distance. She sat next to me, her green skin glowing softly under the afternoon sun, her blue hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of light. "How are you feeling, Jake?" she asked, her voice soft and soothing. I sighed, unsure of how to put my thoughts into words. I'm, overwhelmed, I guess. This is all so new, so strange. I don't know if I'm ready for what's coming." Nira nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I understand. It's a lot to take in. But we are here for you, all of us. You don't have to go through this alone." But there was a sincerity in her voice that made me feel calmer, more grounded. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt like I could talk to someone who truly understood what I was going through. "Why me, Nira?" I asked quietly, turning to face her. "Why not someone else? There are millions of people on this planet, but you chose me. Why?" She smiled softly, her eyes glowing with an inner light. "It's hard to explain, Jake. There's something about you, something in your energy, your essence, that resonates with us. It's not just physical compatibility, it's deeper than that. We feel it in our core." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, I began to understand that this wasn't just about biology or survival. There was something more profound at play, something that connected us on a level I couldn't fully comprehend. As the days passed, I had similar conversations with the other four. Zira was more direct, her gaze piercing as she challenged me to embrace what was happening. "You're stronger than you think, Jake," she had said one night. "You can handle this. We wouldn't have chosen you if we didn't believe that." Lyra was gentler, always offering a kind word or a reassuring touch when I needed it most. She had a calming presence, one that made me feel like everything was going to be okay, even when I wasn't sure it would be. Zira, the quietest of the group, spoke to me the least, but when she did, her words carried weight. "You are important to us," she had said simply. "More important than you know." Well, each of them, in their own way, had helped me come to terms with the reality of what was about to happen. But as the mating season approached its peak, the tension between them began to escalate. It started subtly at first, a lingering glance here, a competitive smile there. But as the days wore on, it became clear that the five of them were vying for my attention in ways that were becoming more intense. One evening I was sitting with Zira in the garden when Thera approached, her expression calm, but her eyes betraying a hint of frustration. "Zira, it's my turn with Jake," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. Zira's eyes narrowed slightly, but she stood up, giving me a small smile before turning to Thera. "Of course," she said, though there was an edge to her voice that hadn't been there before. As Zira left, Thera sat down beside me, her usual calm demeanor replaced with something more serious. "I apologize for the tension, Jake," she said quietly. "The mating season brings out strong emotions in all of us. It's difficult to control sometimes." I nodded, unsure of how to respond. The air between them had shifted in a way that made me uncomfortable, like I was caught in the middle of something much larger than myself. "It's not just about mating, is it?" I asked after a long pause. "There's more going on here." Thera sighed, her gaze distant for a moment before turning back to me. "You're right. It's not just about the physical act. There's an emotional and spiritual bond that forms during this process, and it's intense. For all of us. We're trying to navigate it, but it's not easy." I could feel the weight of her words, the complexity of the situation settling over me like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about biology or survival. It was about emotions, desires, and connections that went far deeper than I had anticipated. As the days went on, the competition between the five of them grew more apparent. Each of them had their own approach, their own way of trying to win me over, and it was becoming harder to navigate the growing tension between them. Nira, always the most gentle, had taken to spending quiet moments with me in the garden, her presence soothing and calming. Zira, on the other hand, was more direct, her flirtations bold and confident, leaving little to the imagination. Lyra's approach was more emotional, often sharing stories of her home planet and her hopes for the future, while Zira's quiet intensity spoke volumes even when she said very little. And then there was Thera. She was the leader, the one who seemed to hold everything together, but even she couldn't hide the growing intensity in her eyes every time one of the others got too close. One evening, after another particularly tense interaction between Zira and Nira, I found myself alone with Thera. She sat beside me, her usually calm demeanor replaced with something more serious, almost conflicted. "I'm sorry, Jake," she said quietly. "This isn't how I wanted things to go." It's not your fault," I replied, though part of me felt overwhelmed by the growing pressure. I didn't expect this either. Thera looked at me, her glowing eyes filled with a mix of emotions I couldn't quite read. "I care about you, Jake," she said softly. "We all do, but the bond. It's more than we can control. It's biological, emotional. Everything. We're trying to navigate it, but it's difficult." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I cared about them too, in ways I hadn't expected. But the situation was becoming more complicated by the day, and I wasn't sure how to handle it. As the days passed, The competition between the five of them escalated even further. Each of them had their own way of trying to win my favor, and the tension between them was becoming palpable. It was as if the closer the mating season came, the more intense their emotions became. One night, I found myself alone with Zira in the garden. She had always been the most direct, the most confident, and that night was no different. "You know you want this, Jake," she said, her voice low and seductive. "You feel the connection between us. It's only natural." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but before I could respond, Nira appeared, her expression calm, but her eyes filled with quiet intensity. "Zira," she said softly, "this isn't a competition. We're all in this together." "Oh!" Zira's eyes flashed with something akin to frustration, but she backed down, giving me one last lingering look before leaving. Nira sat beside me, her presence calming as always. "I'm sorry, Jake," she said quietly. "It's the mating season. It brings out the strongest parts of us, for better or worse." I nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settle over me once again. The tension between them was growing by the day, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep up. As the days wore on, the pressure continued to build, each of the 5 alien women vying for my attention in ways that became more intense, more emotional. The closer we got to the peak of the mating season, the harder it became to navigate the complex web of emotions that had formed between us. I knew that soon I would have to make a decision, one that would change everything, not just for me, but for them as well. Each passing day, I could feel the weight of the upcoming decision hanging over me like a storm cloud, growing darker and heavier. The 5 of them, Thera, Nira, Zira, Lyra, and Zira, seemed to sense it too. Their once harmonious connection was slowly unraveling, and I found myself caught in the middle of it all, unsure how to proceed without hurting someone. One evening, after a particularly heated encounter between Zira and Lyra, I finally realized that avoiding the issue wasn't going to work anymore. Something had to give. The peak of the mating season was fast approaching, and I had to decide if I was going to follow through with this. Whatever this was, or if I was going to walk away. But walking away didn't feel like an option anymore. I was too deep into their world, too connected to each of them in ways I hadn't anticipated. And even though I didn't fully understand it, I cared about them, all of them. Rejecting any of them felt like betraying more than just a request. It felt like severing a bond that had been growing for weeks. The night before the peak of the mating season, Thera asked to speak with me alone. We sat in their garden, the soft glow of alien plants illuminating the space around us. It was peaceful, but there was an underlying tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. Thera sat across from me, her usually calm expression replaced by one of quiet intensity. "Jake," she began softly, "I know this has been difficult for you. We never intended for things to get so complicated." I nodded, unable to find the right words. There was so much I wanted to say but couldn't quite express. "I care about you," Thera continued, her glowing eyes locking onto mine. "We all do, but I need to know where you stand. The peak of the mating season is tomorrow, and if you choose to be with us, it will change everything. Not just for you, but for all of us." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. This wasn't just about making a choice. This was about committing to something far deeper than I had imagined. "I don't know if I'm ready," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Thera smiled softly, her gaze filled with understanding. "That's okay, Jake. No one is ever truly ready for something like this. But we believe in you. We chose you because we saw something in you that we couldn't find in anyone else." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling over me. There was no escaping it now. I had to make a decision. The next day arrived far too quickly. The air felt charged, like something monumental was about to happen. I could feel the anticipation radiating from the 5 of them, their emotions heightened as the peak of the mating season approached. Throughout the day, each of them found a moment to speak with me alone, as if they needed to have one last connection before everything changed. Nira was the first. We sat in the garden, her gentle presence calming my nerves. You don't have to be afraid, Jake, she said softly, her hand resting on mine. We'll guide you through this. You're not alone. Oh. Zira came next, her usual confidence tempered with something more vulnerable. This is going to be intense, she warned, her eyes locking onto mine. But I know you can handle it. You're stronger than you think. Lyra was more emotional, her eyes glistening as she spoke. I want you to know that no matter what happens, we'll always care about you. This isn't just about mating for us. It's about building something real, something lasting. Zira, true to form, said little but conveyed everything with a single look. Her quiet intensity spoke volumes, and I knew that she too was feeling the weight of what was about to happen. And then there was Thera. As the leader, she had always been the most composed, the one who held everything together. But even she seemed affected by the gravity of the moment. Are you ready? She asked, her voice steady but her eyes filled with a mix of emotions I couldn't quite place. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. But this wasn't just about them. This was about me too, about what I wanted, what I was willing to give, and what I was ready to accept. I don't know if I'm ready, I admitted, my voice shaky. But I want to try. I care about all of you, and I don't want to let you down. Thera's eyes softened, and she reached out, taking my hand in hers. That's all we can ask for, Jake. We'll take this one step at a time, together. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, I knew that the moment had arrived. The peak of the mating season was here, and there was no turning back. The 5 of them gathered around me, their glowing eyes filled with anticipation. The air crackled with energy, and I could feel the connection between us growing stronger, more intense with each passing second. They led me to a secluded area in their home, a place I hadn't seen before. The walls were adorned with glowing symbols, and the air was thick with the scent of alien flowers. It was both beautiful and overwhelming, a sensory experience unlike anything I had ever felt before. Thera stepped forward, her voice calm but filled with emotion. This is the place where the bond is formed, she explained. It's sacred to us. Once we begin, there's no going back. But I want you to know that we're with you every step of the way. Oh, I nodded, my heart racing as I took in my surroundings. This was it. The moment I had been both dreading and anticipating. The bond, as they had explained, was more than just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, something that would tie us together on a level that transcended what I understood as a relationship. It was permanent, unbreakable. I stepped forward, my pulse quickening as I felt the weight of their eyes on me. There was no turning back now. Thera began the ritual, her hands glowing with a soft ethereal light as she reached out to me. The others followed suit, their energy combining into something that felt almost electric. I could feel the bond forming, a deep connection that spread through my entire being, linking me to them in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. It was overwhelming, intense, but also beautiful. As the ritual continued, I felt myself becoming a part of something much larger than myself. The 5 of them surrounded me, their presence comforting, reassuring. We were connected now, in a way that went beyond words or actions. I could feel their emotions, their desires, their fears, all of it flowing through me like a river of energy. And in return, they could feel mine. When the ritual ended, I stood there, breathless and overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. The bond was complete, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The 5 of them smiled, their eyes glowing with satisfaction and relief. The tension that had hung over us for weeks seemed to dissolve in an instant, replaced by something deeper, more profound. "We did it," Thera whispered, her voice filled with awe. I nodded, still trying to process everything. "Yeah," I replied, my voice hoarse. "We did." In that moment, I realized that I wasn't just their chosen mate. I was a part of them now, and they were a part of me. And whatever the future held, we would face it together. The air in the room felt different, charged with the energy of the bond that had just formed between us. It wasn't just a physical connection. It was something deeper, something that transcended the boundaries of anything I had experienced before. The 5 of them stood around me, their glowing eyes watching with a mixture of anticipation and relief. The bond was complete, and now came the part that would test everything we had built so far. Thera stepped forward, her gaze soft but intense. "Jake, you've already given us so much by agreeing to this. But now comes the part where the bond truly solidifies." I swallowed hard, my heart still racing from the ritual we had just undergone. "What happens now?" I asked, though I had a feeling I already knew. Thera exchanged a glance with the others, and Nira, always the gentlest, was the one who spoke next. "The connection between us isn't just emotional. The bond also has a physical element, one that strengthens everything we've shared so far. It's not something we can avoid, it's part of our biology." Her words, though carefully chosen, sent a shiver down my spine. I had known from the beginning that this would involve more than just emotional connections, but now, standing here with the weight of the bond between us, it felt much more real, much more intense. Syra, always more direct, stepped forward next. "We'll take it slow, Jake. We're in this together, and you'll never be alone in this process." Her words were reassuring, but there was a part of me that still felt nervous, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. Yet, as I looked around at the 5 of them, I realized something important. They weren't just asking for something from me, they were offering something as well. Trust, care, and connection. In their own way, each of them was opening up to me, and the physical aspect of our bond was just another layer to what we had already built. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Okay," I said softly, my voice trembling slightly. "I trust you." Thera smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across her face. "We'll take this one step at a time." The room seemed to hum with a soft, glowing light as the 5 of them moved closer. The atmosphere shifted, becoming more intimate, yet still filled with the sense of respect and understanding that had been there from the beginning. Thera was the first to take my hand, her fingers warm against my skin as she gently guided me to sit with her. The others formed a circle around us, each watching with a sense of calm reverence, as though this moment was sacred to them. "We're going to guide you," Lyra said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "And we'll be there for you the entire time." My heart pounded in my chest, but I nodded, trusting them to lead the way. The bond between us pulsed with life, a connection that felt more natural now than it had when this entire journey had begun. Thera leaned in closer, her hand resting gently against my cheek. "This isn't just about our survival anymore, Jake," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "This is about the connection we've built. It's about all of us." Her words, coupled with the sincerity in her eyes, helped to ease some of the tension that had been building inside me. I wasn't alone in this, far from it. What was happening now wasn't just a duty or a biological requirement. It was something we were sharing, something that would bring us even closer than before. The physical aspect of the bond began slowly, almost reverently. Thera, being the leader, was the first to initiate the deeper connection, her touch gentle and soothing. The others followed suit, each of them taking turns, their approach different yet in harmony with one another. Nira's touch was soft and careful, while Zira's was more confident, her boldness balanced by Lyra's tenderness and Zira's quiet intensity. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced before, an exchange of energy, emotion, and desire that felt as though it transcended the physical realm. It wasn't just about the act itself, it was about the bond that had formed between us, the shared experiences, and the trust that had been built over time. Each of them brought something different to the connection, and as the night progressed, I felt myself opening up to them in ways I hadn't thought possible. Through it all, they were attentive, caring, and patient. They had promised to guide me, and they kept that promise, never pushing too far, always ensuring that I was comfortable and at ease. The experience, while intense, was also deeply emotional, filled with a sense of mutual respect and understanding. As the night wore on, the bond between us grew stronger, solidifying in ways that words couldn't fully describe. It wasn't just a mating ritual, It was a merging of hearts and minds, a connection that went far beyond the physical. When it was over, we lay together in the soft glow of the room, the air filled with a sense of peace and fulfillment. The tension that had been present for weeks had finally lifted, replaced by a calm sense of completion. Thera, lying beside me, smiled softly as she reached for my hand. "You did it, Jake," she whispered. "The bond is complete." "Oh!" I looked around at the others, who smiled in agreement, their eyes glowing with a gentle warmth. There was a sense of unity now, a closeness that hadn't been there before. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, my voice filled with emotion. "All of you." Nira, who had always been the most sensitive to my emotions, leaned in and kissed my forehead. "We'll always be here for you, Jake. You're part of us now." Her words sent a wave of warmth through me, and I realized that this wasn't just a temporary arrangement. The bond we had formed was permanent, unbreakable. I was no longer just an outsider looking in, I was one of them. As the night faded into early morning, we lay together, the room filled with a quiet sense of contentment. The intensity of the experience had left us all feeling exhausted, but it was a good kind of exhaustion, the kind that comes after something profound and life-changing. For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. The uncertainty, the fear, and the doubt that had plagued me since the beginning were gone, replaced by a deep sense of belonging. We had done it. The bond was complete, and we were all stronger for it. As I drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the five of them, I couldn't help but think about how much had changed since that first day when I had met Thera and her sisters. What had started as a strange and overwhelming situation had turned into something beautiful, something that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. And whatever the future held, I knew that we would face it together, bound by a connection that was deeper and more meaningful than anything I had ever known. The following days were a blur of calm after the emotional storm of the bonding night. The tension that had once weighed heavily between us seemed to have dissipated, leaving behind a peaceful serenity that was almost surreal. I felt connected to Thera, Nira, Zira, Lyra, and Zira in ways I couldn't have imagined before. There was a lightness in my heart, and though I knew our bond was profound, I had no idea just how deeply it had affected me. However, the calm was short-lived. It started with small, almost imperceptible changes. My senses seemed sharper. Sounds that had once been distant now rang clear in my ears, and I could pick up subtle smells from the environment that I hadn't noticed before. My vision, too, seemed sharper, colors more vivid. At first, I chalked it up to the emotional high of the bonding process. But then, the changes grew more pronounced. One morning, as I was preparing breakfast, I accidentally dropped a glass. I instinctively reached out, and to my shock, I caught it mid-air, my reflexes impossibly quick. I stared at my hand, my heart racing. It wasn't just that my reaction had been fast, it had been unnatural, beyond human capacity. I kept this to myself at first, unsure if I was imagining things. But over the next few days, more changes followed. I began to feel a strange connection to the environment around me, like I could sense the energy in the air, in the earth beneath my feet. It was subtle but undeniable, a hum of life that I had never been attuned to before. One evening I sat with Thera in the garden, unable to keep it to myself any longer. "Something's happening to me," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I feel, different." "Oh." Thera turned to me, her glowing eyes filled with concern. "Different how?" I hesitated, unsure how to explain. "It's like, I'm more in tune with everything. I can hear things I shouldn't be able to hear. My reflexes are faster. Colors are brighter. And I feel this. The, energy. I don't know how to describe it." Thera's expression shifted, her concern deepening. "The bond," she whispered. "It's affecting you." I looked at her, confused. I thought the bond was just emotional. Physical." It's more than that," she said softly. "The bond between us isn't just about our connection, it's about shared energy. When we bonded with you, we didn't just link our emotions and bodies, we linked our very essences. It's possible that our energy is now affecting your physiology. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. So, what does that mean? Am I becoming like you? Thera reached out, placing a comforting hand on mine. No, not like us. But the bond has given you access to things you wouldn't have had as a human alone. Our species is deeply connected to the energy of the universe, to the natural forces that govern life. It seems that by bonding with us, you're now beginning to sense those forces too. I sat back, the weight of her words settling over me. This wasn't just about forming a connection with them, it was about becoming part of something larger, something far beyond what I had understood. What do? I asked quietly, feeling both awe and fear rising within me. Thera smiled softly, her gaze gentle. You don't have to do anything, Jake. This isn't something to be afraid of. It's a gift, one that will help you understand. You're part of us now, and we'll guide you through this. But know that this connection is permanent. The bond we've formed will continue to grow and evolve, just as we will. Her words should have been comforting, but part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this. Something I wasn't fully grasping yet. The next few days were a whirlwind of discovery. Thera and the others helped me understand the changes I was going through, teaching me how to harness the newfound energy I could feel around me. It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. I could feel the world in ways I had never thought possible, as if the very fabric of reality had been opened up to me. But there were also moments of fear. What if the bond continued to change me? What if I lost parts of myself in the process? The thought gnawed at me, even as I grew closer to Thera, Nera, Zara, Lyra, and Zera. And then, just as I was starting to come to terms with my new reality, something unexpected happened. It was late one evening when a strange hum filled the air, a vibration that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding as the hum grew louder, more intense. I wasn't the only one who noticed it. Thera and the others quickly gathered in the garden, their expressions tense. What's happening? I asked, my voice trembling. Thera's eyes were filled with worry. We're not alone. Before I could respond, a ship descended from the sky, hovering above us with a low, ominous rumble. It was sleek and metallic, unlike anything I had ever seen before, and it pulsed with a menacing red light. My heart raced as the realization hit me. This wasn't a peaceful visit. They're from a rival species, Nera whispered, her voice filled with fear. They've come for us. What? The tension in the air was palpable as the ship landed, and I suddenly understood the full weight of the bond I had formed with Thera and the others. I wasn't just their mate. I was part of their world now, part of the intergalactic struggle that had followed them here. The doors of the ship opened, and a group of figures emerged. They were tall, with dark skin and glowing red eyes, their movements sharp and calculated. Thera stepped forward, her expression calm but her body tense. Stay behind us, she whispered to me, her voice filled with urgency. We'll protect you. But as the rival aliens approached, I could feel something inside me shift. A surge of energy that I hadn't felt before. It was as if the bond between us had awakened something deeper, something primal. The figures stopped in front of us, their leader stepping forward. His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a jolt of recognition. A deep, unsettling connection that went beyond mere instinct. This human, the leader said, his voice dripping with disdain. He is bound to you? Thera's chin lifted, her voice firm. He is. The leader's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the air between us crackled with tension. Then he is part of the conflict now. Before I could react, the leader raised his hand and a burst of energy shot toward us. But instead of fear, I felt something else. Power. Without thinking, I raised my hand, and the energy dissipated around me, absorbed into the bond that linked me to Thera and the others. The leader's eyes widened in shock, and I could feel the strength of the bond surge within me, a power I hadn't known I possessed. I wasn't just connected to them. I was part of their strength, part of their world in ways I hadn't understood before. You made a mistake coming here, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. The leader hesitated, clearly taken aback by my newfound abilities. And in that moment I realized that I wasn't just their chosen mate. I was something more, something powerful. As the rival aliens retreated, defeated, I stood there, my heart racing, still processing what had just happened. Thera turned to me, her eyes filled with pride and awe. "You're stronger than we ever imagined," she whispered. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. The bond between us had changed everything, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The dust from the confrontation with the rival aliens had barely settled, but everything had changed. The bond between me and Thera, Nera, Zira, Lyra, and Zira had deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. I wasn't just their mate. I was part of something much larger, something powerful and interconnected. As we stood in the quiet aftermath of the encounter, the five of them gathered around me, their expressions a mixture of pride, relief, and something deeper: respect. I wasn't just the human they had chosen to bond with. I had become one of them in a way that transcended biology or culture. I had faced their enemies, stood with them in battle, and somehow found a strength I hadn't known I possessed. Thera reached out, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Her glowing eyes were filled with warmth. "You protected us," she said softly. "You've proven that our bond is stronger than any threat." I nodded, though my mind was still spinning from everything that had happened. "I didn't even know I could do that," I admitted, my voice shaky. "That power. Where did it come from?" Nera stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "It's the bond," she explained. "When we joined with you, we didn't just link our emotions and bodies, we shared our energy. It's part of who we are, and now it's part of you." I swallowed hard, trying to wrap my mind around the enormity of what she was saying. The bond wasn't just emotional or physical. It was something that connected me to the very essence of their being, to the energy that flowed through them, and now through me as well. "Does this mean I'm changing?" I asked, uncertain of what the future held for me now. Lyra, always the most nurturing, smiled gently. "Not changing," she said softly. "Evolving? The bond has unlocked parts of you that were always there, but now you're more in tune with the world around you. You're still human, Jake, but you're also connected to us in ways that make you more." Her words were both comforting and unsettling. I was still myself, but I was also something new, something that defied the boundaries of what I had once known. The power I had felt during the confrontation had been unlike anything I could have imagined, and I wasn't sure how to control it yet. As the days passed, Thera and the others helped me understand my newfound abilities. It was a slow process, filled with moments of frustration and awe. I could feel the energy of the world around me, the subtle hum of life, the pulse of the earth beneath my feet, the vibrations in the air. It was overwhelming at first, but with their guidance, I began to learn how to harness it, how to direct it in ways that felt natural. I wasn't just their mate anymore. I was a part of their world in every sense of the word. The bond between us continued to grow stronger, and I found myself falling deeper into my connection with each of them. Thera, always the leader, guided me with patience and wisdom, while Nera's calming presence helped me stay grounded. Zira challenged me, pushing me to embrace my newfound strength, and Lyra's nurturing spirit offered comfort when I needed it most. Zira, quiet and intense, taught me how to focus, how to channel the energy within me in ways I hadn't thought possible. Together, we formed a team, a unit that was stronger than the sum of its parts. But even as I adjusted to this new normal, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. The confrontation with the rival aliens had been a warning, a glimpse into the larger conflict that Thera and the others had been trying to escape. And now that I was part of their world, I knew that the dangers they faced were also mine. One evening, as we sat together in the garden, I turned to Thera, the question that had been gnawing at me finally surfacing. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice filled with uncertainty. "The rival aliens, they know about me. They know about our bond. Are they going to come back? Thera's expression darkened slightly, and I could see the worry in her eyes. It's possible, she admitted, but we'll be ready for them. The bond we've formed is strong, Jake. It makes us more powerful than we were before. Together we can face whatever comes. Her words were meant to be reassuring, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the conflict wasn't over. The rival aliens had retreated for now, but I knew they wouldn't stay away forever. They had seen the power of our bond, and they would want to challenge it. As the weeks passed, I found myself growing more comfortable with my new abilities, but I also grew more vigilant. I trained with Thera and the others, learning how to control the energy that flowed through me, how to use it to protect myself and them. It was a strange, exhilarating experience, one that pushed me to my limits, but also made me feel more alive than I had ever felt before. And then, one night, the peace we had found was shattered. It happened without warning, a sudden surge of energy that jolted me awake in the middle of the night. I sat up, my heart racing, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the vibrations of something dark and dangerous approaching. I wasn't the only one who felt it. Thera and the others were already awake, their expressions grim as they gathered in the living room. "They're back," Zira said, her voice sharp with determination. "The rival aliens, they've returned." My heart sank. I had known this was coming, but I hadn't expected it to happen so soon. "We're stronger now," Nira said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "We can face them." Thera nodded, her eyes filled with resolve. "We will face them. Together." Oh, as we stepped outside, the air crackled with energy, and I could see the familiar red glow of the rival alien ship descending from the sky. This time, though, I wasn't afraid. I could feel the bond between me and Thera, Nira, Zira, Lyra, and Zira pulsing with strength, and I knew that we were ready. The ship landed, and the leader of the rival aliens emerged once again, his red eyes glowing with malice. But this time, I could sense the fear behind his bravado. He had underestimated us before, and he wouldn't make that mistake again. "You should have left while you had the chance," he snarled, his voice filled with venom. Thera stepped forward, her chin held high. "We're not going anywhere," she said firmly. "And neither is Jake. Our bond is stronger than anything you can throw at us." The leader's eyes flicked to me, and I could feel the tension building between us. But this time, I wasn't just a bystander. I was part of the fight. The battle that followed was intense, but it wasn't like the last time. This time, I knew what I was capable of. The energy that had once felt overwhelming now flowed through me with purpose, guided by the bond I shared with Thera and the others. Together, we fought as one, our movements synchronized, our power amplified by our connection. The rival aliens were strong, but we were stronger. In the end, they retreated once again, defeated and humiliated. But I knew this wasn't the last time we would face them. As we stood in the quiet aftermath of the battle, Thera turned to me, her eyes filled with pride. "You did it, Jake. You fought with us. You're truly one of us now." "Oh," I smiled, though my heart still raced with adrenaline. "We did it. Together." And as I looked around at the five of them, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, bound by a bond that could never be broken.